The cool metal of the scalpel feels steady in my hand, as always. The hum of the ventilator, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, these are the sounds of control, of life in my hands. The OR is my domain. Outside, life is messy and uncertain. But here, under the surgical lights, I know exactly what to do. Scalpel, I say softly, though I don't have to. My scrub nurse, Jenna, has worked with me long enough to anticipate my every move. The blade is in my palm a second later. The familiar sensation, the cool steel that slices with precision. I don't hesitate. There's no room for hesitation in trauma surgery. A delay could mean death. The patient on the table, mid-30s, male, car crash. Ribs shattered, internal bleeding. Without this surgery, he has minutes, maybe less. The clock ticks. I make the first incision, watching the blood rise to the surface. His heart is weak, irregular, but I can save him. I will save him. Retractor, I command. The chest cavity opens up and I focus on the task. Nothing else matters. Not the tension of the hospital merger looming over us, not the ridiculous policy changes Ryan Blake, our new administrator, wants to force on the department. None of that exists in the OR. Here, it's just me and the patient. I locate the source of the bleeding, steady my breath, and clamp down. The relief is instant. The heart rhythm stabilizes. The patient lives another minute, another hour, another day. I can't see beyond that, but it doesn't matter. All I need to do is give him that chance. Good work, Doctor. Carter, Jenna says quietly. I nod, not needing the validation, but grateful for the acknowledgement all the same. I start to close, my mind already moving to the next task. Maybe a cup of coffee before I check in with Dr. Lewis, my mentor. He's been off lately, fatigued and coughing more than usual. He'll tell me it's nothing, but I know him too well to believe that. As I finish suturing the incision, a strange sensation washes over me. It's not dizziness. No, it's something else, something unsettling. The room seems to tilt, but I'm not moving. A wave of heat passes through my chest, my vision blurring around the edges. Evelyn? Jenna's voice reaches me, muffled, as if through a fog. I blink hard, trying to shake it off. The OR lights blur, the sounds of the machines dull in my ears. I've worked long hours before, pushed my body past its limits plenty of times, but this feels different. The blurring intensifies until, for a moment, I see nothing at all. Then it hits me. A searing pain in my chest. The scalpel slips from my hand, clattering to the floor. I gasp, my hand clutching at my chest. My heart is racing too fast, irregular like it's trying to escape my ribcage. Dr. Carter! Jenna's voice is sharp now, panic edging her words. The pain intensifies and I can't breathe. It's like my lungs are being crushed, like my entire chest is collapsing in on itself. The world fades, the noise of the OR dissolving into silence. And then nothing. I wake to blinding white lights. My eyelids feel heavy, as if they're being held down by invisible weights. I blink against the glare, trying to orient myself. The ceiling above me is unfamiliar. There's a hum, not the low, calming sound of ventilators, but something quieter, less mechanical. I'm in a hospital bed. The thought is sluggish, and my mind feels like it's wrapped in fog. I flex my fingers and toes experimentally, relieved when they respond. Dr. Carter? The voice is familiar. I turn my head and see Jenna standing next to the bed, her brow furrowed in concern. There's a chart in her hand, but her usual professionalism is replaced by worry. What happened? I rasp, my throat dry. You collapsed in the OR. Jenna's voice is tight. They had to resuscitate you. I freeze. Resuscitate me? The surgery. I start, but she shakes her head. The patient is fine. You finished, then collapsed. Your heart... She doesn't finish the sentence, but she doesn't have to. A near-death experience. I've brought back so many people from that edge, but I never thought I'd be the one on the table. I look down at my body, covered in the standard blue hospital gown. My heart. I rub a hand over my chest, feeling the slight soreness there. My pulse is steady now, but the memory of the pain is vivid. It's impossible to ignore. I'm fine, I say, more to myself than to her. I need to get back to work. Jenna looks like she's about to argue, but I don't give her a chance. I push myself up in the bed, swinging my legs over the side. The room sways for a moment, but I grit my teeth and steady myself. I've never been the type to let weakness hold me down. I'll get the attending, Jenna says, but I shake my head. No need. Just help me up. She hesitates, but after a moment she reaches out and supports me as I stand. The dizziness is brief, passing after a few seconds. I focus on my breathing, slow and steady. I'm not going to let this stop me. We walk out of the recovery room and into the hallway. I'm about to head toward the surgical wing when something catches my eye. A soft glow out of place in the sterile hospital corridor. I blink, but it's still there. A faint glowing thread stretching from one room down the hall to another. What is that? I murmur, more to myself than to Jenna. She looks at me confused. What's what? I follow the thread with my eyes. It pulses faintly like a heartbeat, connecting 2 points in the hospital. I step toward it, my body moving on instinct. The closer I get, the clearer it becomes. 2 people, 2 souls, tethered by this glowing line. But how is it possible? I blink hard, but the thread is still there, impossibly real. I reach out, my hand hovering inches from it. But it's not something I can touch, it's something I can only see. And then it hits me, the near-death experience. This has to be some kind of hallucination. That's the only logical explanation. I'm still recovering from the resuscitation, still processing the shock. I shake my head, trying to clear it, but the thread remains. This isn't real. It can't be. But when I turn away, I notice something else. A second thread. And this one is connected to me. It's glowing faintly, stretching down the hall, further than I can see. My heart races again, but not with pain this time. With something else. Something unsettling, something I don't want to acknowledge. I follow the thread's path, my steps slow and deliberate. It leads me around the corner, through the emergency wing, past a group of nurses chatting near the break room. The thread stretches ahead of me, unwavering, and then I see where it ends. Ryan Blake. He stands at the nurse's station, flipping through a file with that same arrogant, aloof expression I've come to despise. My soul thread leads straight to him. I stand frozen, staring at the faint, glowing thread that connects me to Ryan Blake. It's impossible. Ridiculous. I'm still recovering, that's all. There's no other explanation. I take a step back, my heart pounding, and the thread tugs lightly, almost imperceptibly, as if it's pulling me closer to him. Number. This is insane. I squeeze my eyes shut, willing the thread to disappear, to fade into the same hallucination that it surely is. When I open my eyes, it's still there, clear as day, connecting me to Ryan Blake, the most insufferable man I've ever known. I need air. I turn on my heel, ignoring the strange looks from the nurses, and head toward the stairwell. The walls feel too close, the fluorescent lights too harsh. I burst through the heavy door and take the stairs 2 at a time, not stopping until I'm on the roof. The wind hits me like a slap, cutting through the lingering fog in my brain. I brace my hands on the edge of the railing, sucking in deep breaths of cool, fresh air. Above me, the sky is overcast, the city below muted, but I barely notice. My fingers curl tightly around the metal railing. What the hell is happening to me? I don't believe in fate. I don't believe in anything I can't measure or test or prove. But this thing I'm seeing defies all logic. Soul threads. It's like something out of a bad romance novel. And yet I'm seeing it with my own eyes. And Ryan Blake? Of all people, why him? I close my eyes again, trying to steady the chaotic swirl of thoughts in my head. I've clashed with Ryan on every front since the day he arrived. He's cold, calculating, and more concerned with budgets and spreadsheets than the lives we're saving. Every conversation with him feels like a battle. We don't get along. We don't even like each other. So why would I be connected to him? The rooftop door swings open behind me and I tense, not ready to face anyone just yet. The last thing I need is a concerned colleague asking if I'm okay, or worse, Ryan himself showing up to lecture me about hospital policy. But when I hear the quiet footsteps, I realize it's not Ryan. Evelyn? I turn and see Dr. Lewis stepping out onto the roof, his eyes tired but filled with a calm that always seems to center me. He's leaning more heavily on his cane today, and the sight tugs at something in my chest. He shouldn't be out here, not in this weather. His cough has been getting worse, though he'd never admit it. I thought I might find you up here, he says, coming to stand beside me. His presence is steady, grounding. You shouldn't be out in the cold, I say, deflecting. He chuckles softly, his breath fogging in the air. I could say the same to you. I offer a half smile, but it doesn't reach my eyes. Dr. Lewis has known me long enough to see through it. He's seen me through the toughest moments in my career, and in many ways, he's the closest thing I have to family. You look like you've seen a ghost, he says, his voice quiet. But there's a weight behind it. He's not asking about the surface-level stress of the job. He knows something's off. I sigh, glancing back out over the city. I had a strange experience, I admit, my fingers still gripping the railing. He doesn't say anything, just waits. That's what I've always appreciated about him. He knows when to give me space to find the words. I keep seeing these threads, connecting people. I glance at him, gauging his reaction, expecting confusion or concern, but he just listens. They're like glowing lines and they link one person to another. It's like they're showing who's meant to be together or, I don't know, it sounds crazy. Dr. Lewis tilts his head slightly, his brow furrowed, but not in disbelief. When did this start? After the resuscitation, I say quietly. I've been seeing them ever since I woke up. He nods, thoughtful, but doesn't dismiss what I'm saying. Near-death experiences can change the way we perceive things. Some people report seeing lights, hearing voices, or even feeling connected to something larger than themselves. But this isn't some vague feeling, I say, frustration edging into my voice. It's real. I can see these threads. They're tangible. Dr. Lewis shifts, his gaze thoughtful. And what do you think they mean? I want to tell him I don't know. I want to say they mean nothing, that they're just a product of trauma or some psychological side effect. But the truth is, deep down, I'm terrified they do mean something. I think they're showing who people are destined to love, I admit, the words tasting foreign and strange on my tongue. But that can't be right. I don't believe in destiny. Dr. Lewis smiles faintly. You don't have to believe in something for it to exist, Evelyn. I scoff more out of habit than conviction. That sounds like something you'd say to a patient who just saw a miracle. His expression softens, and for a moment, I see the exhaustion in his face, the weight of years spent healing others while neglecting his own health. Miracles happen every day in this hospital, he says quietly, but we call them something else. We call them survival, recovery, hope. Whatever name we give them, they're still real. I look away, my mind racing. A part of me wants to laugh it off, to dismiss all of this as nonsense. But I can't shake the image of that thread, the one connecting me to Ryan, that thin glowing line that refuses to disappear. And what if I don't want what it's showing me? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Lewis sighs, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. That's the thing about destiny, Evelyn. It doesn't force you to follow it. It just shows you the possibilities. Later, back in the ER, I try to lose myself in work. I stitch up a cut on a teenage boy's arm, examine the x-rays of a patient with a dislocated shoulder, review a post-op patient's chart. Every task is a welcome distraction, a tether to the reality I know. But it doesn't last. Because every time I glance up, I see them, the threads. connecting nurses to doctors, patients to visitors, strangers to strangers, glowing, unbreakable lines crisscrossing the hospital like invisible pathways. It's overwhelming. And yet, somehow, I can't tear my eyes away. And then I see Ryan again. He's standing by the nurses' station, talking to one of the senior nurses about supply budgets. His face is hard, focused, the way it always is when he's talking about numbers and cost efficiency. But something in me shifts as I watch him now. That thread, that cursed, glowing thread, pulses faintly, tying him to me. I hate this. I hate that I can't explain it, that I can't control it. And most of all, I hate that part of me, some small, infuriating part of me, wants to know what would happen if I followed it. I can't take it anymore. I walk toward him, my footsteps firm and purposeful, my mind set on one thing, finding out the truth. "Blake," I say, my voice sharper than I intend. He looks up, surprised to see me, but quickly recovers, his usual stoic mask sliding into place. "Dr. Carter," he says coolly. "What can I do for you?" I stop a few feet away from him, close enough that the thread between us hums with tension. I take a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "I need to talk to you." His brow furrows, but he nods. "Go ahead." I hesitate for a moment, realizing how insane this is going to sound, but I can't back down now. Have you ever felt like you were supposed to be connected to someone? Like, like there's something bigger at play, something you can't explain? Ryan stares at me, his expression unreadable. "Are you talking about fate?" "Maybe," I say, though the word feels wrong on my tongue. "I don't know. I just need to know if you've ever felt that way." For a moment he says nothing, and then to my surprise he steps closer, his voice low. "I don't believe in fate, Carter. I believe in choices." His words hit me harder than they should. Choices. That's what I've always believed in too. But now, standing here with this invisible thread between us, I'm not so sure. I open my mouth to argue, to say something, anything to push back against the pull I'm feeling. But before I can speak, the thread between us pulses again, stronger this time, almost like it's alive. And suddenly I don't know what I believe anymore. I don't know why I'm standing here. I should walk away. I should turn around, retreat to the safety of the OR where everything makes sense. But instead, I'm rooted to the spot, staring at Ryan Blake like he holds some answer I desperately need. He doesn't move either. We're standing close enough that I can see the tension in his jaw, the slight twitch in his fingers as if he's just as unsettled as I am. Choices, I repeat, more to myself than to him. It's the word I've lived by my entire life, but now it feels hollow, empty. I glance down at the invisible thread that ties me to him. It's as clear as ever, pulsing gently between us, a reminder of something I can't explain. What if you didn't have a choice? What if something bigger was already decided for you? He tilts his head slightly, studying me like I'm one of his financial spreadsheets, something to be solved, categorized, and filed away. I don't believe in that. Of course he doesn't. Ryan Blake is a man of order, efficiency, and control. He probably wakes up at 5 a.m. every day with his schedule planned down to the minute. I know his type. Hell, I am his type. At least I thought I was. I didn't think I did either, I admit, and it surprises me how raw my voice sounds, like I'm confessing something I hadn't even admitted to myself. But then something happened. He arches an eyebrow. Something like what? I hesitate. How can I possibly explain the soul threads without sounding completely unhinged? He already thinks I'm difficult, unpredictable. This will push it over the edge, but I can't stop myself from speaking. I had an experience. After my resuscitation, I glance around to make sure no one is listening. The ER is buzzing with the usual chaos, patients being wheeled in, nurses rushing from room to room, but no one is paying attention to us. I started seeing things. These threads, connecting people. Ryan narrows his eyes, but he doesn't interrupt. They're not visible to anyone else, I continue, the words tumbling out before I can stop them. but they connect people. Soul threads, I guess. I've seen them between couples, between people who don't even know each other. And now, my voice falters as I glance down at the glowing thread. Now I see one between us. There. I said it. The silence that follows is deafening. Ryan's face doesn't change. No shock, no disbelief, just that same unreadable mask he always wears when we're at odds in meetings. I brace myself for the inevitable brush-off, the cold dismissal that will remind me why I never wanted to have this conversation in the first place. But then he speaks. "You think we're connected by fate," he says, his voice flat. It's not a question. It's a statement. A fact he doesn't believe in but is entertaining for the moment. I swallow hard, feeling ridiculous. I don't know. I don't even believe in fate. But I can't ignore what I'm seeing. He steps closer, his eyes locked on mine, and suddenly the air between us feels too thick, too charged. "So what do you want me to do with that information, Doctor?" Carter, believe in something I can't see, follow some invisible thread. His words sting, but there's a strange undercurrent to them, something I can't quite place. It's not just his usual arrogance or stubbornness, there's something else, something more. I hold his gaze, refusing to back down. "I don't want you to do anything, Blake. I'm just telling you what I see." He inhales sharply, his eyes narrowing. "And what if you're wrong?" I open my mouth to respond, but before I can say anything, the loud screech of an incoming gurney cuts through the tension. A paramedic bursts through the ER doors, shouting over the chaos. "Severe head trauma. GCS of 6, multiple fractures. We need trauma now." Ryan and I both turn, the conversation dropping like a stone. It's what we do. Drop everything when the real emergencies come in. My feet are already moving before the words even register. I'm back in control, back in the world I know. The gurney rushes past, and I fall into step with the paramedics, taking over as we wheel the patient into Trauma Bay 1. The familiar weight of the situation settles over me like a second skin. This is where I thrive. The patient, a young woman, is barely conscious, blood matting her hair. The paramedics spout off the vitals, blood pressure dropping, pulse weak, and my brain kicks into high gear. "Get me a CT scan, stat!" I bark at the nurse, already assessing the injuries. For the next hour, the world narrows to the life in front of me. I'm in my element, directing the team, controlling the chaos, doing what I do best. This is my sanctuary where everything makes sense. By the time the patient is stabilized, I feel the familiar rush of satisfaction. Another life saved, another victory. It's what I live for. But as I step out of the trauma room, the rush fades. The reality of the conversation I had with Ryan slams back into me. I glance around the ER, half expecting to see him standing nearby, but he's gone. And so is the thread. I blink, startled. The thread, the one connecting me to Ryan, is gone. I look down at my chest, half expecting to see the glowing line stretching across the room, but there's nothing. No pulsing light, no connection, just emptiness. What the hell? I spin in a slow circle, scanning the room. I can still see the other threads, the ones between patients and visitors, between nurses and doctors. They're all still there, glowing faintly, but mine, the one that tied me to Ryan, is gone. I take a deep breath, trying to calm the sudden panic rising in my chest. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I wanted to see the thread, and now that I've calmed down, it's gone. But that doesn't explain the others, the ones I can still see all around me. Before I can process what's happening, my pager buzzes. I glance down at it, my stomach sinking. It's the attending physician, Dr. Lewis. Without thinking, I rush toward his office. Something's wrong. I can feel it in the pit of my stomach. Dr. Lewis has been coughing more lately, his fatigue worsening, but he's stubborn. He won't admit anything is wrong, even when it's staring him in the face. I burst into his office without knocking, my heart pounding. "Doctor! Lewis!" He's slumped in his chair, his face pale, his breathing shallow. Panic grips me as I rush to his side, feeling for a pulse. It's weak but steady. His eyes flutter open as I check his vitals, but he's too weak to protest. "I'm calling a code," I say, grabbing the phone. "No," he croaks, his voice barely audible. "Don't make a fuss." I ignore him, dialing for help. "This isn't a request," I say, my voice sharp with worry. "You need medical attention now." Within minutes, a team is rushing in to transport him to the ICU. I stay by his side, watching as they load him onto a stretcher. He's barely conscious, his breathing laboured, and I feel a knot tightening in my chest. This is Dr. Lewis, my mentor, the man who taught me everything I know about saving lives. And now he's lying here, fragile and vulnerable, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. As the team wheels him away, I follow close behind, my mind racing. How did I miss this? How did I not see how bad things had gotten? And then in the hallway I see it again, the thread. It's faint, barely visible, but it's there. A glowing, frayed thread that connects Dr. Lewis to someone. But this one isn't pulsing with life. It's weak, almost faded, as if it's barely holding on. My heart clenches. What does that mean? Is it a sign of his condition, a warning that his time is running out? I swallow hard, forcing myself to focus on what I can control. I won't lose him. Not like this. But as I watch the thread flicker, a terrible thought creeps into my mind. What if the soul threads don't just show love? What if they also show how close someone is to slipping away? I trail behind the ICU team, my eyes locked on the weak thread connecting Dr. Lewis to someone I can't see. My heart races. Is this what the fading thread means? That he's close to death? The idea terrifies me. The threads, these glowing ethereal connections, have been strange and confusing, but I never considered they might reveal something so final. The ICU doors swing open and I follow them inside. They're already preparing Dr. Lewis for a battery of tests, hooking him up to monitors and assessing his vitals. His breathing is shallow, his skin pale, but he's still conscious, his eyes flickering with a mix of frustration and exhaustion. He hates being on this side of the hospital bed. I stand at the doorway, feeling useless. This is the man who's guided me through every crisis, who's always been there to offer wisdom or a calming word. Now there's nothing I can do but watch as he lies there, fragile and vulnerable. "Dr. Carter?" The attending physician, Dr. Ahmed, glances over at me. "We've got it under control. You don't have to stay." I nod, but my feet won't move. I know they have it under control. This isn't about the medicine. This is about the fraying thread, his soul thread, that seems to be flickering like a dying flame. Is that what's happening? Is his life slipping away right in front of me? I can't stay here. I can't watch him like this with all these thoughts spiraling in my head. I back out of the ICU and head toward the nearest empty waiting room. Once inside, I slump into a chair and drop my head into my hands. I hate this feeling of helplessness. I hate it almost as much as I hate seeing those threads. What good are they if I can't do anything about them? If I can't save him? I take a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but my thoughts keep drifting back to the fading thread. Could it be tied to his condition? Is it some kind of warning? And if it is, what can I do about it? I close my eyes, forcing myself to focus. This is no different than any other crisis I've faced. I'm a surgeon. I'm trained to think critically, to act when others might freeze, but this feels different, out of my control. I lean back, the sterile smell of the hospital all around me, and I can't help but think of the day I woke up seeing these threads. I've been trying to ignore them ever since, convincing myself they're just an illusion, a trick of my mind. But the more I see them, the more real they seem. The door to the waiting room creaks open, and I tense, expecting a nurse with news about Dr. Lewis, but it's not a nurse. It's Ryan. He steps inside, closing the door behind him, and for a moment we just stare at each other. The tension from our last conversation still hangs in the air, unresolved and heavy. But something about his expression is different now. Less guarded, more concerned. "I heard about Dr. Lewis," he says, his voice quieter than usual. "How is he?" I look away, the knot in my chest tightening. "Not good. They're running tests." Ryan nods, stepping closer. There's a pause, a silence that stretches between us, and I half expect him to walk away, to leave me to my thoughts. But he doesn't. Instead, he sits down in the chair across from me, his gaze steady on mine. "You don't have to stay," I say, though I don't really mean it. He shrugs. "You don't either, but here we are." The room feels smaller with him here, the air thicker with unspoken things. I glance at the space between us, half expecting to see the thread again, but it's not there, just empty air. For some reason that bothers me. It's been hovering between us for days, pulling at me, reminding me of something I didn't want to acknowledge. And now that it's gone, I feel untethered. Ryan watches me for a moment before speaking. "You seem off." I let out a humorless laugh. "You could say that." His eyes flicker with something I can't quite read. "Is it about Dr. Lewis? Or is there something else?" I hesitate. Part of me wants to tell him everything, about the threads, about the way I saw his thread connected to mine, about how none of it makes sense. But another part of me, the rational, logical part, knows that telling him will only make things worse. He won't understand. He'll think I've lost it. "I've just been seeing things," I say vaguely, rubbing my temples. "Things I can't explain." Ryan doesn't press, but his gaze sharpens. "Like what?" I shake my head, not ready to go there. Nothing that makes any sense. For a moment, he says nothing, just watches me with that calculating look he always has, like he's trying to solve a puzzle. I wonder if I'm just another problem for him to figure out, something to be filed away and dealt with later. But then, to my surprise, he leans forward slightly, his voice softer than I've ever heard it. "You don't have to make sense of everything, Carter. Sometimes things just are." I blink at him, startled by the shift in his tone. It's not what I expected. Ryan Blake, the man who thrives on control and efficiency, telling me that some things don't need to be understood. I open my mouth to respond, but before I can say anything, my pager buzzes again. I glance down at it, my stomach tightening. It's the ICU. They need me. Without a word, I stand up, the weight of everything crashing down on me once more. I need to go. Ryan nods, standing up as well. "I'll be here if you need me." I freeze, my heart skipping a beat at his words. There's something about the way he says it, so matter-of-fact, so steady, that makes me feel something. I don't know what it is, but it's unsettling. I don't respond. Instead, I turn and head toward the ICU, my mind a blur of confusion and fear. When I reach Dr. Lewis's room, the team is already there, gathered around his bed. He looks worse, paler, weaker. His breathing is shallow, and the monitors beep with a steady, ominous rhythm. I swallow hard, pushing down the panic rising in my chest. I'm a surgeon. I can handle this. I have to handle this. "Dr. Carter." Dr. Ahmed greets me with a nod, his face grim. "We're seeing signs of multi-organ failure. His kidneys are shutting down, and his heart's struggling to keep up." My stomach drops. Multi-organ failure. The words ring in my ears, each syllable heavier than the last. I step closer to Dr. Lewis's bed, my hands shaking. He's barely conscious, his eyes half open, but there's a faint flicker of recognition when he sees me. I reach out, taking his hand, and his fingers curl weakly around mine. "I'm here," I whisper, my voice cracking. "I'm right here." He doesn't respond, but his grip tightens ever so slightly. I blink back, the tears threatening to spill over, refusing to break down. Not here. Not now. And then I see it again. The thread. It's so faint, so weak that it's barely visible. But it's there, connecting Dr. Lewis to someone, and I know, deep down I know what it means. His time is running out. I squeeze his hand, my heart breaking. I can't lose him. Not like this. But the thread flickers and I know it's slipping away. Just like he is.